Yes.
Okay, so I'll get started here. Welcome everyone to the October 19th, 2023 meeting of the Ann Arbor Renters Commission. The purpose of the Renters Commission is to advise the City Council and the City Administrator in matters affecting renters in our city. Our commission is made up of voting members who are appointed by the mayor and approved by City Council, two non-voting City Council liaisons, two non-voting members representing different landlord perspectives, and a non-voting representative from the University of Michigan Student Legal Services. To speak during any one of the public comment opportunities, you'll be able to speak through the webinar link or by phone. For phone access, please call 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 935-8080-1941. It's 935-8080-1941. To be called on to speak, callers must press *9 if you're calling in by phone, or use the raise hand feature if you're doing it through the web link, which is a2gov.org/renters commission meeting. The first letter of each word is capitalized, so renters commission meeting. You will then be called on by staff and you can give a 3-minute comment. City staff will indicate when callers have 30 seconds left of your 3-minute comment, and then after which you will be placed on mute so we can go to the next speaker. So moving on to roll call, which is item 2. Please state the city that you're calling in from. So we'll go down the list. Commissioner Chen is not here. Commissioner Peterson is not here. Commissioner Kelly.
Here, calling in from Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Welcome, Patrick. Commissioner Droppelman.
Present from Ann Arbor.
Welcome. Commissioner Else.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Very nice to see you. Commissioner Lowe's is not here. Commissioner Tibbetts is not here. Commissioner Rosen is not here. Commissioner Ratcliffe is not here. Commissioner Thomas is not here. Commissioner Pitts.
Here from Ann Arbor.
So nice to see you, Kim. Commissioner Good.
Here, Ann Arbor.
Welcome. I am also here calling in from Ann Arbor. Councilmember Redina is not yet here. Councilmember Harrison.
I'm here from Ann Arbor. I'm off camera because I'm under the weather, but I'm here.
Welcome.
Good to see you all.
Nice to hear you. Okay, item 3.
Thanks.
I hope you feel better soon.
Thank you.
Item 3, approval of our agenda. At this point, we can't approve our agenda, right? Since we don't meet quorum. Okay. However, we can also not approve our minutes from the previous meeting, which is item 4. So we move directly on to item 5, which is our first general public comment period, which I think we should still do.
All right. Public comment can be made by phone at 877-853-5247 or 888-788-0099 and entering the meeting ID 935-8080-1941. You can also address the Renters Commission using the web link, and that is a2gov.org/renters commission meeting. And if you are joining with the web link, you can use the raise hand feature. Or if you're calling in, you can press *9. We'll give it just a second. If you'd like to address the Renters Commission for up to 3 minutes, go ahead and raise your hand. We'll call on you. No attendees have indicated.
Okay, thank you, Kristen. We can move on to item 6, which is old business. We had asked for an update about the recommendation that the commission had made back in, it was April, to ban pre-tenancy fees. This was in response to the wait list fee issue in the city. And so I guess I'll ask our council member here today if there are any more updates on that.
No updates on that. We're working on it. I think we're in the process of meeting with Zachariah and who else are we? Gail. Yes. So we will bring to you two first, and yeah, but we're making progress. So that's the only update there.
Okay, thank you. Are there any comments or questions about the proposal from April? Jordan?
I think I'm glad we're working on this as we are getting into leasing season. This is, we're hearing these stories already, being at the Capitol a couple of times over the last couple of weeks and hearing about the bills that are working on there. It doesn't sound like they're going to be very fast. So I think it would be good for us to get going on these kind of things here. The one thing I just kind of, I read the recommendations in April and read them again. Hopefully we can be very clear on that. The second recommendation about the verbiage of the leasing, we weren't as clear as reading it again now and kind of going a few more months with all of the stories and knowledge. I think that we need to be clear on what we're requesting of city council, and I assume that you guys are. I just kind of wanted to verbalize with the timelines and when you can hand someone a lease and what situations you can hand someone a lease is still kind of unclear to folks in the community. So I think it would help to clarify. That was my only thought as reading through it again today.
Yeah, thank you, Jordan. I can pull up the two recommendations made, and you were referring to the second recommendation, which was to consider clarifying the language in the amended early leasing ordinance.
Yeah, I think, we say here that it doesn't say that the landlord shall not offer a lease. I mean, there are situations in which the landlord could offer a lease if that, they've given the renewal offer and it's requested by the tenant, unless we're changing the ELO. To me, when I read this, I wasn't clear. Were we saying we want to change the ELO to say, for example, you can't even get a renewal lease until 180 days? Or are we saying that this is just to prevent the countersigning situation? Do you get what I'm saying? Like I read this again and I couldn't remember back from April what we were thinking with this specific bullet point, because shall not offer a lease to a prospective tenant for signing. If the tenant's requesting it, that's fine as the way things are right now. So I wasn't sure what we were saying in this bullet point, I guess, looking at it now.
Okay. Yeah, my understanding is that we were saying that that council should consider just making it not allowed for landlords to even offer leases.
And then would we say until 180 days? I just felt like there was a piece, you know what I'm saying? Like that
Sure.
There was a piece.
Yeah, I think we should talk more on that. Yeah. Thank you. Julia?
Well, I don't know. Do we want to talk more about that? Because mine was a different question.
Well, I want to hear your question. I think let's hear your question and then we can loop back around if I think I need some time to think about what Jordan said personally.
Okay. I saw the kind of report about the junk fees and stuff, but I don't recall ever seeing any draft legislation. Is there any draft legislation?
The commission didn't draft any legislation yet. My understanding is that yeah, we'll go ahead, Cynthia.
Yeah, that's what we're working on with Mr. Reiser.
Okay. And I guess if there's any way we could help with that, I'd appreciate it if you bring it back to the commission. I think
We will be. We're meeting with Zachariah and Gail, and then we will at that point bring it to the commission.
Okay, great.
Any other questions or comments? I think, just put my hand up, but I think as I'm looking at this, the specific case that we were trying to outlaw here is when a brand new tenant, not somebody who's renewing, was getting offered a lease way earlier than it was allowed for the landlord to sign it, right? And that doesn't seem right to me, that they should be able to say they have an occupied unit and they have a new tenant who's interested. If they offer it to the new tenant and they know that they can't sign it for months, and they get the signature from that new tenant, and then they take that and refuse to countersign it, that's just the case. We think that as we were writing the recommendation, I think we came to the conclusion that it wasn't right that the landlord could offer the lease to that prospective tenant, knowing that they couldn't sign it for months, and not even knowing if the current tenant was going to renew or not in many cases. So I think that's why we said we don't even think that they should be able to offer it at that stage to a brand new tenant, not for renewal. Gail?
So I realize I'm coming in the middle of this, but I am seeing those that happen already, where landlords are offering leases that the tenants will sign, and the landlord says they can't countersign until March or whenever, and of course the problem with that is that, arguably the tenant is now bound to the lease, even though the landlord is not. So a tenant who changes their mind may not be able to go someplace else because they've already signed the lease, even though the lease hasn't been countersigned. So that's, I'm slowly starting to see some right to renew early leasing ordinance issues and questions and stuff right now. Not a ton, but this is one of them. So just putting that out there.
Yeah, I think we had talked about, I think we had talked about 10, like making I don't know, I thought it was this meeting, one of them making it like the landlord must sign the lease within 10 days or something. I thought at one point we had some discussion surrounding language of like, if a lease is signed by a tenant, a landlord has to sign it within 10 days or something at some point in one of our conversations.
But they can't because of the early leasing. I mean,
that's what I'm saying. So you couldn't, that language then would prevent them from, I think we were talking about different ways to go at it. And I thought at one point we had considered that.
Right. And then this is another issue. Sorry, Zachariah. So this is another issue I'm seeing, we're starting to see, and maybe this isn't the time for this discussion at all, but we're starting to see issues where, and you tell me if it's not and I'll wait, where landlords are, and maybe we talked about this last year too, where landlords are saying, I'll renew your lease. You don't have to let me know until 150 days from the end of the lease, but I'm willing to, give it to you at a much lower rent if you sign now. So I don't know if that's come up or if now's not a good time for it or whatever. Zachariah is smiling. I'm not sure what that means, but I'll let you go.
Well, Julia, you're next. Go ahead.
I was just going to mention that kind of thing because I've definitely heard some of the larger landlords in town saying, yeah, we can't sign a lease yet, but we'll give you this discount if we get your commitment now, those kinds of things. So I think that this number 2 would help current tenants too.
I'll point out that, there's no guarantee that the discount that they're giving isn't just the regular rate, and that the regular rate that you would be getting if you waited longer is just a hiked up rent, And so I think from the perspective of a tenant, it's like not, oh, you're giving me a discount now if I sign early. It's if I don't sign early and if I don't exercise my right to wait, you'll be raising my rent. And I think that when we talked to Nick Rumel, who was on this commission, he thought that there was a good chance that that was not legal, given the language of right to renew, because that's, in his eyes, not good faith negotiating,
I
or
don't
not
think,
not a good faith offer.
yeah, no, I agree with him. I just didn't know if that was something that we discussed here. And it may be that we have to litigate it to make, to determine if that's allowed or not. And maybe we're heading there soon. But I just didn't know if you guys discussed it, if that's come up at all. I don't know if other people are seeing it in their worlds, but I'm starting to see it for sure.
Yeah, we have not. I mean, we discussed it, since I know that some landlords did this last year. I know Capo Dyneco did that, among others. But I think it
Right.
is there an alternative to testing it in the courts?
I don't know. I mean, last year the issue was there was, or another issue was that there was a dispute about whether or not the right to renew ordinance. Sorry, the dog says slow or something. Whether or not the right to renew ordinance was in effect for leases that had already been signed. So nothing happened last year. Now that, I mean, it's clear that the right to renew ordinance is in effect for leases that are currently in effect. So that other argument's taken away. Yeah, and I don't know if there's another way to resolve this outside of litigation. But I'll take all thoughts.
Thanks, Gail. Any other questions, thoughts about the recommendations of the report or the process that we're going through now with our council members?
I mean, I don't have any additional thoughts other than what's been discussed already. Some of these methods that landlords are using, I mean, it sounds predatory to me, so that's my opinion. Just sounds like a way to skirt around, to skirt around it, so.
Thanks, Cynthia. Yeah, I really hope that we can get something implemented as soon as possible, because I think this has been going on for 2.5 years or so, and it pains me to see that, especially seems to have a greater effect on student tenants, but it's not just student tenants. To see them have to go through that is very unfortunate, and I hope we can address it.
Yeah, we definitely will. I'll talk with I'll reach out to Mr. Reiser about that as well. And we can discuss as well, the four of us, when we meet. Yep.
Thank you. So as for the second recommendation there, I know, Jordan, that you brought up, I'm not sure how we want to continue that conversation, if we think we should.
Yeah, I mean, I think your goal, right? I agree. I think your goal was to deal with this countersign thing. I mean, we have two big issues, right? We have the countersigning thing, which seems like next level predatory, because these students are trapped. I mean, it could be 6 months that these students are trapped, thinking they have an agreement, and also thinking they have a house without knowing. I mean, that was the other issue last year. I signed a lease, but then I was told I didn't actually have a house. And so then they're panicking, and as late as April, I heard some. So that's one issue. And the other thing is the dealing with the timing and the increasing the rent, the predatory, I'm going to increase this over time. And so I don't know if you guys are working on it, I don't think we necessarily need to come back to the conversation right now, as long as city council isn't going to put something through without bringing it back for all of us to have a peek at and say, no, this wouldn't cover this situation. I think, right? I don't know that we need to spend more time on it, or is there, I guess, Cynthia and Zachariah and Gail, is there anything that I've said that you want more clarity on, or is there anything that would be helpful to the three of you? If not, I don't think we need to belabor it if we're going to see it again before it's good.
I don't think there's anything that needs to be clarified. I'm not sure if that was on the topic, on the agenda for discussion for our future meeting. I think we were just talking about the banning of fees, but I think it definitely should be on the agenda. So if we have the time, we certainly will discuss it when we are able to meet.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Great. Any other questions, comments on that point? 6-A. Okay. We can move on to item 7, which is our new business. We have a report from our tenant education committee. Can someone who attended that committee please give like a brief summary of what you remember us talking about?
I think I'm the only one here. And I was trying to look at my notes to remember what was said. Coming out of the last commissioners meeting, we had talked a little bit about education, and people said they didn't feel fully up to speed on evictions and on security deposits as 2 areas as commissioners we wanted our own personal information on. So there was a bit of discussion whether it makes sense to have, a session just for commissioners, or whether it makes more sense to do a broader public education forum kind of thing where commissioners could go, but also any general tenants that wanted to go. I think with evictions, the decision was because we have a video on evictions from Legal Services South Central Michigan, that we would ask all the commissioners to view that. And then at next month's meeting, if people have any questions or would like any further detail, we'll have eviction law on the agenda for the next meeting. So this is a request for everybody to please watch that. And then security deposits, we're going to talk about at the next meeting. So we kind of booted that one. There were a couple of things in the scope of evictions besides just general law. This is the way it works. You get a 7-day notice, you go to court, blah, blah, blah. There's also, I was going to follow up with Hawk, which handles money in the county to help with eviction prevention. So try to get statistics from them and see where they're at now that the federal money from the pandemic is gone. And there was going to be some checking in with other groups too. Jamie was going to talk to Poverty Solutions to see if they have any updated stats on evictions in Ann Arbor. And Zachariah was going to talk to the county to see if they're taking any movement towards addressing evictions with something like an eviction diversion program. So that was probably a longer report than you wanted, but once I started, it was hard to stop.
Thank you so much, Julia. That was a very good report, I thought. Jordan, I know you were there too. Was there anything that Julia
Nope.
didn't catch?
She covered all of what I remember as well.
So I did contact the county commissioner, and we're going to see if we can get a staff member from the county government to come and talk to us about what they're trying to do on the issue of housing generally. I'm waiting to hear an update, but it sounded like there was definitely a possibility. And I know that at yesterday's county commission meeting, I think they had a work session and they were talking about a lot of really relevant issues. Rosanita, who's on the commission, made me aware of that. And I was not able to watch that meeting, but if you're interested, you can check it out. Any questions for the people who attended? the committee meeting?
I was just going to ask about the link to the video on evictions. Will that be sent around after the meeting, Kristen? Or has it already been sent around and maybe I missed it?
Yes, I plan to send it out after this meeting.
Thank you.
I brought this up at the tenant education committee meeting, that since we were talking a lot about evictions and, you know, we're talking about eviction diversion program. We also talked about a right to counsel program. These things can help people who are facing evictions. And I'm just wondering if I want to gauge your opinions about engaging other bodies, like other parts of the city government, on the issue of exploring these policy options of eviction diversion and right to counsel. I was thinking of sending an email to HHSAB and the Human Rights Commission, but I don't know who else I should contact. Or, I mean, does anyone think that that's not a good idea, or think that other people should be invited to that conversation?
Isn't Jeffrey our representative on the Human Services one?
It's a good point. I think I should definitely ask Jeff about that.
I don't have any concerns about reaching out and think it would be a good idea.
Okay, great. Well, I saw that Rosanita was just able to join us, so we do have a quorum now. So welcome, Rosanita.
Hi, sorry I'm late. I had another meeting before this that every month I never get to the end to, so I figured I needed to actually stay for that one once.
Understandable. Glad to have you. You know, Kristen, at this point, should we go and approve the agenda and the minutes?
That would be great. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll just take roll for you, Rosanita. You're obviously here. Where are you calling from?
Oh, I'm calling from Ann Arbor.
Great. Welcome. So we have quorum. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda we've been going through?
I'll move to approve the agenda.
Thank you, Rosanita. Second?
Second.
Second by Julia. All those in favor say yay.
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 Yay. All those opposed say nay. Okay, we just approved the agenda, and then we can move on to the approval of our minutes. To a motion to approve the last meeting's minutes. That's September 21st meeting's minutes.
All motion.
Thank you, Patrick. Motion by Patrick. Second?
Second.
Second by Julia. All those in favor say yay.
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 Yay. All those opposed say nay. Okay, so we approved our minutes. Great. And then we'll just continue with the agenda where we were. So, oh, I'm sorry. You know, I totally missed that we did have the right to counsel on the agenda. We should have discussed that at that point. I apologize. Okay, we can move on to 7-B, an update from the Green Fair event. We had a table there. Would anyone like to give an update? Julia and Kim, both of you were there, and I tabled as well.
It was a pretty low-key event, but a fair amount of booklets. People did come by and pick up the, city booklets from us. And it was less than a dozen. I think people came and talked about specific questions on issues they were coming up with. I don't remember what the tally was on that little board.
Yeah, I think we weren't really prompting people to do the board. We were just mostly talking with people. So
Yeah, but definitely, the bulk of the complaints were about how hard it is to live in Ann Arbor because it's so expensive, and it's expensive without being good. It's not like it's upscale expensive and like, oh, it's worth spending extra of my income because it's so nice. It's kind of like, oh my God, it's barely passable and I'm paying all my income.
anything you want to add, Kim?
I just thought it was a good turnout, actually, because I did walk around a little bit, so it was nice to see the people. And I was surprised that people would walk up and start, I think you engaged them a lot, Zachariah. So I think that was important, and you were able to pull information out, because I thought they were pretty nice. People didn't come in and start yelling or complaining. They just were very interested in who we were, as well. So yeah, I was excited about it. Yeah, I'm ready for next year. I think I'll be ready.
Thank you, Kim. Well, I certainly had a great help engaging people. Um, I know one tenant came up and talked to us about having an eviction on his record, and he wanted to know what to do because he was going to move to Ann Arbor soon, and he was looking for tips on that. And I truthfully didn't know what to tell him, but Julia thankfully had some good tips. Do you want to share those just so we all know what to, a good way to respond when somebody asks a question like that, Julia?
Specifically with the eviction record. Yeah, I think it's just the general life kind of advice. When you're upfront and honest, you usually get a better reaction. And if it's a credit kind of issue, to be able to come and say, look at, this is what my credit score is, this is where I'm at, I've got a good job now, you can call them for a reference, I'm going to be a good tenant. Just kind of to make that speech for yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Julia. Yeah, so overall, I was very happy with just talking with people. I think it's a great thing to go out and table and have those kinds of conversations. So I hope we can consider doing another tabling event, just maybe at Liberty Plaza or someplace like that, and just talk to people. Okay, anything else on that, the Green Fair? Okay, we can move on to 7-C, which is a discussion about landlords asking tenants to act as agents. So in Ann Arbor, you need to have, if you're the landlord, you have to either live in or near the city and be your own agent or hire an agent. I believe I got that right. Is that right, Jordan and Bob? Yeah. Okay, Jordan, you want to correct the record? Okay, so make sure. So what you can't do is, if you're totally outside of the city, you can't just buy a property and rent it to somebody without having someone locally to act as the agent. And apparently city staff is saying that tenants are now being asked to act as the agents, which is a new phenomenon to my knowledge. Jordan?
Yeah, I mean, that's not entirely unusual. I'm not sure it's a new phenomenon. I think there's a couple ways that happens, right? Students are desperate for housing and they want to get a leg up. So students think that and I haven't heard of this outside of students, so that's why I'm using the term students. If they think that they can go knock on a house and say, hey, are you renewing? And the tenants say, no, we're not. And they say, can we look at your house, your home? And we're here. and then they walk them through the house. Now, this is obviously a huge safety risk. I don't know why anyone would feel comfortable with this on either side, but it happens all the time. And I can tell you that in all the parent groups right now, that's the answer parents are giving other parents. Just have your kid go around and knock on doors of a house that looks well maintained. So in some ways, the renters do this. They seek this out. I think we're probably talking about a little different thing, but it would be remiss not to mention that there are times that that's happening. Now, we email all of our tenants. We say, do not show the house to anybody. Do not tell them if you're releasing. Do not say anything yet. It's just, we haven't asked you yet, first of all, if you're renewing. And so please don't let people into your house. Do not feel pressured to even answer a door if someone knocks and you're not expecting it, etc. Not everyone does that. So that's kind of one situation. The other situation is, I think they do say, oh, you can go knock on the door. Some landlords do tell tenants they can do that very thing. Or probably in terms of inspections, though I haven't heard this directly, I usually hear it more in terms of leasing. There's an inspection, can you be home? The inspector's coming on this day at 3 p.m. And I think that's the other scenario in which they're asking them to do some work for them. The third thing would be there's a repair person coming, and, if it's, for example, I can think of last week, we had a plumbing issue. It was 11 o'clock at night when they call us. We can get a plumber out there at 2 a.m. We ask the tenants if they feel okay. They say, oh yeah, nobody has to come over here. We'll just meet them. We know they're coming, and they let them in. So I think there's 3 situations in which landlords sometimes ask people to do the work for them, but agent in term of leasing. So I think those are kind of the 3 scenarios. The repair thing, that's kind of usually a joint decision, but the leasing, the 2 other leasing concerns are where I hear it most. So I'm curious if I see you had it come on the agenda. So I'm curious as to if you're hearing like other variations of the situation, but that's my knowledge of kind of what it might look like.
Julia?
So those all sounded like perhaps very reasonable times where a tenant might assist the landlord in the business of the property. What happened with us is that why this is on here is that through the city clerk's office, was it, Kristen?
Some rental housing staff let me know that they're getting, like, the volume is up on this a little bit. Other rental housing staff said that occasionally you get stuff like this where a tenant is like working with the city as the agent with inspections and scheduling and stuff like that. And that's where it's a little bit tricky. It's not, my understanding is that it's not super common. But it is either, my guess is either it is more common than it has been in the past, or maybe there's been a couple like kind of time consuming ones that staff, so maybe it seems like it's happening more, but really it's maybe 1 or 2 cases that are coming up a lot. So I haven't heard of this. I haven't experienced this as a renter in Ann Arbor. I can't think of what else. Also,
I mean, for the record, Julia, I don't think anybody should be asking anybody else to show an apartment. That is a job of like, I mean, I don't think those kind of things are okay. I think that I just wanted to give the whole spectrum. Like, I do think if at 2 a.m. the tenant's comfortable, there's a house full of 7 people and they're like, yeah, we'll meet Roto-Rooter, that we then don't have to pay a maintenance person to go meet them. I guess I just want to give the whole spectrum. I don't think that anybody should be asking a tenant to show a house or make leasing decisions, or unless it's a sublease. So that's the other situation. But it sounds like we're talking about something entirely different, perhaps,
Right.
which is the work of managing the property. And unless you're being compensated specifically to do that as a manager of a building or a super or something like that, though you don't hear those terms much anymore, that to me doesn't seem all that reasonable unless you're being compensated. We have one house that's a big house that it's the deal that the basement apartment takes the trash cans out or something. There's, and they sign it. That's in their lease. It's just a minor response, those kind of things are discussed ahead of time. But this is more work for everybody if tenants are doing it.
It's not just an issue of the amount of work, it's the issue of actually being registered with the city as
exactly. Yeah.
the property.
Yeah, that too.
So I have a question about that process. I mean, if you're just if the repair person comes, for example, I know you mentioned that scenario, Jordan, mean, you don't have to be registered with the city as an agent to accept them, right? Yeah.
No, but I think what you're talking about is like people making, I would consider scheduling an inspection kind of making a decision for a property. You're saying it's not the registered owner, but to be honest, because we own and manage, I don't know the process for having Oxford manage the house that I own, because as far as the city, it should say both. Maybe Kristen, you can clarify, because on the, when you look at things on eTrack or Stream, it does have the owner and the agent, right? They're both on there. And if you're owner manager, it has your name for both, but I frequently don't see the current management company correct on those forms. For what it's worth, I look up a lot of housing records for random U of M parents, but maybe Kristen can kind of clarify what that's supposed to look like, because that I think would help us understand too.
I don't have good information on that. I think that if they're different, it just hasn't been updated. And that's just like an administrative process maybe that rental housing is working on. I want to add that rental housing said that agents or landlords don't need to be present for an inspection. Anyone over the age of 18 can open the door for a city inspector. So that's not required. And then the other thing I wanted to share is that I spoke with attorney John Reiser and Chris McFarland in the rental housing, and Chris said that issuing a ticket to a agent who is also a tenant is extremely rare. Because when I was talking with Reiser about it, we were kind of like, it's kind of the circle of the tenant maybe is responsible for maintenance, because they would be issued the ticket because they're the agent, and that's where the issue is. But when we spoke to rental housing, they were like, that's not what we see as much. So
Thanks, Kristen. Julia?
I just wanted to say this is on the books to have a local agent as a way to protect tenants from absentee landlords. That there was a big problem. Somebody would own 1 or 2 properties, but they lived in Arizona and you could never get a hold of them to get anything done. So it was a tenant win to get this requiring a local agent.
Yeah, I think the purpose is defeated if they make the tenant the agent and they could still be on their vacation in Florida or whatever, Arizona, wherever it is. But this is on the city's website, just so everyone is understanding what agent, what we're referring to. It says the homeowner may represent the property as their own agent. If they do not live or have an office within 25 miles of the city of Ann Arbor, they must choose a local agent. An agent can be a friend, relative, or hired property management service. The agent does not have to be a licensed real estate agent. And it says that you are required to complete and upload the property update and registration form on Stream. So these changes may include phone number, email address, agent information, or other changes. So that's how it gets into the system. There's a system obviously that requires that you upload that info.
But so they're not doing that when a tenant is the agent, Kristen. Is that, I mean, and I guess I have 2 questions. They're not updating that agent thing each year, I'm sure. But I'm curious to hear if you've seen something different. But then the second piece being, you said something about a ticket. You're talking about like a ticket for trash cans being out or something. Is that when you're saying ticket, or are you talking about something different?
Like a citation, like didn't pass the inspection. Now you have a fine. He said that it is not common practice to give those to tenants because they understand. He's kind of like, I understand the tenant doesn't have.
Okay, so the inspectors are nervous to fail an inspection if the tenant is the agent?
No, they would issue to the landlord. They would issue to the owner in that case.
Well, sure. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't expect that a tenant would ever get you failed the inspection. I mean, I don't know. I guess in our experience, you have to get a re-inspect. It's not like you get a fine.
The owner gets the.
I know, but I don't get a fine if I fail an inspection because something is out of code, which does happen even when you're the best landlord. There's something that you can miss that's small, and they're come back and do a re-inspection. Like, I don't get a big ticket as the owner for having, you pay it, you get one inspection, at least my understanding, my husband does most of that, but you get an inspection and you get one re-inspection for free. And then beyond that, there would be more fees, but those aren't like tickets. It's not like your trash cans are still out tickets. So I guess I'm curious a little bit more maybe is what is rental housing? They just wanted us to know, what are they looking for help with a part of this? Like what, or they just want us to kind of know what was going on. I guess I'm more curious as to like what spurred it, because in our experience, these aren't things like, and it is complicated with a ticket. I bring up the trash can thing. We just had a tenant that got trash can ticket for having their trash cans out too long. They had a dispute. It was a neighbor. They had photos. They could act basically, we didn't have the evidence, so we wouldn't go to court for the ticket. They acted as our agent with our permission. Maybe this is what they're talking about. They acted as our agent in court because it was their trash cans, their ticket, and they took the pictures. Like, I don't know. Yeah. So if you have any more information on what they're asking for help with or why they were telling us, maybe that would be helpful.
We've asked rental housing in the past. Can you let us know if you're seeing anything new or weird, kind of like in the rental, like in their world, what are trends they're seeing? And I think that was the intent of this communication, to say like we're getting we have increased volume of work related to this issue. Just wanted to let you know. To me, it kind of seemed like from the information that I have was that some like landlord type responsibilities were falling on the tenant. I think related to inspections and that type of thing.
That makes sense. And I mean, if the increased work is like, this person doesn't know where anything is in the house. I mean, if my maintenance guy's there, he's showing you where the utility room is. You're speeding through the house. And if somebody who doesn't know those things, I mean, I guess I'd just be curious as to what specifically was the increased work, but thank you. That makes sense.
I think it is, my understanding was that like the work the tenant was doing was as the agent working with the city to do scheduling and compliance, stuff like that.
Thanks. That's yucky.
Any questions, comments on this issue?
I have one more thing. On Monday, I am meeting with IT to learn how to run the report that shows registered address, agent address, so we can see exactly how common it is.
Great, thank you. Okay, well, I would encourage everyone to think about this issue. Maybe if you happen to have the time to do some research and see if other cities have similar systems and if they allow something like this, that'd be interesting to know. Okay, we move on to 7-D, which is a draft motion by Commissioner Good. Julia, do you want to introduce this?
So this kind of came out of the Green Fair. We were standing around talking about electricity, and so then we start talking about outages, and it kind of led us down this path of how outages are harder on tenants than they are on homeowners. And so that led to the draft of this. I'm not sure if people have comments. It makes more sense to go more into that, or I was hoping
Any
everybody.
comments or questions? Yeah. Go ahead, Bob.
So I think this is a incredibly good statement about the problems that that renters face in with the current less than reliable electric grid that we face. I wonder if the motion would be better suited to say we'd really like this fixed, however it can evolve, that to give city to give city council the message that here are 4 bullets that are difficult and we would like them fixed, please. Because I don't know that we can say with certainty what the solution to this would be. And I have no opinion on it particularly, other than I share this sort of dismay with what's going on, and would like it fixed as well.
Thanks, Bob. Rosanita?
I agree a lot with what Bob had to say. I think that it's important to relay to council the 4 bullet points. I don't think that, given the phase 1 report that the city received, that we can say with 100% certainty that the city having its own public utility is going to solve all of these problems. Number 1. Number 2, staff, we haven't received anything from, what happened at from all this was that the OSI staff was supposed to, really look at everything and then make recommendations for what was to happen what they think should happen moving forward. People who are experts, right? Who have degrees in, energy and whatever else. And we haven't seen those recommendations yet. They haven't said whether or not they recommend a phase 2 study. That hasn't been presented at a council meeting at this point. And so I don't necessarily agree with the last sentence. I think that it's best to just focus on the 4 and, informing council that we need to see this resolved, and pursue all reasonable pathways to resolving that. That's all.
Thanks, Rosanita. I'll open up by saying I do have quite strong feelings on this issue. And sounds like there's no dispute or controversy over the problems that are facing tenants, and that the fact that this has a larger impact on most tenants than it does homeowners. And I can attest to that personally, unfortunately. I think that if people aren't comfortable making a direct recommendation about the way forward, one of the things, one potential option is to recommend that there's more investigation, and one way to do that is to say that we think that the phase 2 study on this issue should be funded. So basically, the study that just came out on this issue and other energy issues, is called like the energy options analysis. It did recommend that the municipalization should be investigated further. And I know that OSI's recommendations, which is the Office of Sustainability and Innovations recommendations, won't be out for several months. This is my understanding. And I think that other commissions are taking up the issue of whether a phase 2 study is warranted. So if we're going to proceed with this, I think that no controversy over the problems. And if we are going to talk about a path forward, I'll say I'm open to many things, but we could just say this warrants more investigation. Rosanita?
Oh, I'll let Councilmember Redina go first because I saw his hand was raised.
Thank you, Commissioner. I just wanted to, I don't want to jump in too much on the actual dialogue here. obviously got the presentation at the work session on the report. One thing I did want to say is I don't believe that the next recommendation will be coming just from OSI. So I kind of wanted to OSI is not a like public utility expert necessarily, and so obviously if we were to move forward with the utility, we would need to hire experts outside of OSI to do that work. So I think we will receive a broader staff recommendation on next steps, but I don't want to put all of that burden onto OSI. So I just wanted to say that. And then I think I largely agree. I think with what's being said, I think Zachariah is correct. The report that we received from the consultant did recommend moving forward with a phase 2 study, which would be the valuation of all of those assets, understanding what the actual cost would be. They acknowledged in that report that phase 2 could ultimately determine that moving forward beyond that would make that this could be financially infeasible, but they weren't ready to make that decision yet because we don't have those numbers. But I do want to acknowledge that one of the things we learned during that work session was the priorities for the community, and the top 3 things that came out of that were reliability, resilience, and cost. And obviously the problems here are directly related to some of the reliability and resilience problems of the network. I will acknowledge, I've talked to Zachariah about this. I've talked to others that are engaged with Ann Arbor for Public Power that at this stage, kind of reading through that report, waiting to hear back from staff, I'm kind of leaning in favor of going forward with phase 2. But I will also acknowledge that one of the biggest challenges for me is simply that if DTE were not to fight us and were to say, here, take over, and the storm came through tomorrow, all of the same houses that are without power would be without power again. So just taking over the utility is not going to solve for reliability or resilience. It requires kind of a different approach to how we handle maintaining the network and making sure that we have a reliable grid. I do think DTE is failing in that respect. But I also want to just to acknowledge that being publicly owned doesn't solve that problem. It's the flexibility, I think Zachariah would agree with this, the flexibility of being able to make those decisions locally, and being able to invest differently into how we maintain the grid that would create those solutions longer term. I do think DTE has been failing us on this front.
Thanks. Rosanita?
No, I believe in a phase 2 study because I am very much a nerd, and so I did read through the original report, and there was a lot that they left out because it costs money to pursue the other avenues, to know what's I guess the legal aspects of it, as well as trying to figure out, really the true cost of what it would be, and trying to figure out more about the actual conditions and bringing in others who can try to figure that out for the infrastructure as well as the staffing that it would entail. I think that, so I agree with this, endorsing a phase 2 study, if you will. But I do think that we still should be advocating that council pursue other, all ways of resolving those 4 bullet points, because it would take a while to, start the phase 2 study and complete it. And so I think that those 4 should still be worked on.
Thanks, Rosanita. Julia?
We can go through a formal motion process where we do this and then do a friendly amendment, or we can wait and do this next month and I can try to rewrite it. But I just wanted to make a comment. Maybe this is something we need to do as a commission. I feel I'm kind of frustrated with the OSI that I was on their green rental housing task force, and we made recommendations for changing some of the code around weatherization, all within things that, are allowed by state law. And it felt like a hot cake, like it never went forward. And we couldn't even get OSI to make a statement saying they supported the existing weatherization law. Inspectors don't routinely go up into attics to look for whether the insulation meets the required amount. And OSI wasn't willing to support that. So I'm a little think maybe this commission needs to reach out to them to see if they could do a little bit more on rental stuff. And then I'm open to the commission on how we want to handle this motion.
I'll just point out, I did contact OSI about the Green Rental Housing Task Force's recommendations. And I asked them how quickly they if they're still pursuing them, how quickly this would be created and drafted into an ordinance. And it seems like they're still working on it. So I think that they probably would be open to hearing our perspective on any of the issues related to that issue. I can't say more than that, but it sounds like they are working hard on it. I will, I'll pass this off to Rosanita in a second, but it seems like since there's some discussion back and forth about what this motion should look like, it might make sense to table this until the next meeting. In the meantime, anybody who has feelings on this can reach out to Julia, and maybe we can have a collaborative writing process of editing this motion. Rosanita?
I was just going to say that maybe, we could, I don't know, talk about it. And is it something that we could workshop in, is it next month's tenant education meeting? So that way it's ready for the regular Renters Commission meeting?
It's a good question. I think that I'm not sure if the tenant education meeting is the correct place for that. Would we be willing to send out a win to meet just on this topic specifically for 30 minutes or so, or however long it takes?
Yeah, I'm willing. Is that so? Then it's just creating like a little ad hoc committee. Yeah.
I just don't want to eat into the tenant education committee if they have things that they want to discuss. That's not this,
Okay.
Okay, Julia, what would you like to do with this motion?
Table it until the next meeting.
Okay. Does that require a second and all that, or is it automatically tabled?
Yeah, we hadn't moved it yet, so I don't think so.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we can continue here. Thank you for the discussion. I appreciated everyone's perspectives. And I'm glad there's consensus that with the way things are, it's not okay, because I lost a lot of soup that way. I'm very upset about that. I'm afraid to make a new homemade soup because I know I'm going to lose power again. Okay, 7-E, right to counsel. We had discussed this before, but I'll open the floor real quick, and we can have a short discussion about it again. Does anyone have thoughts about the proposed right to counsel program? I know previously I said I'm interested in exploring right to counsel and an eviction diversion program, since they are similar in their goals. And I think that it might make sense to engage other parts of the city government, HHSAB, the Housing and Human Services Advisory Board, Human Rights Commission, and probably some outside groups. Rosanita.
Well, I'm not diametrically opposed to right to counsel if things get to the point of an eviction court. I do think that As the Renters Commission, we should be looking at ways to avoid helping tenants avoid getting to the point that it ends up in court or filed with court, not like as us taking taking things on, but there are other cities do have other programs like tenant landlord mediation programs um, as well, and those have also been found to have been rather successful. Um, and so I think that to me, that's also a path that I'd like to explore or for to see about the city possibly exploring.
Thanks, Rosanita. Julia?
I really support that, and that kind of mediation before going before a judge is what Philadelphia is doing. And that's worked really well there. I also want to push the point that Michigan is a little unique in the United States in that you are allowed to withhold rent legally here. If you don't pay all your rent in Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, you're just evicted. Here you can say, go in the court and say, look, I tried to get repairs from the landlord. Here's a notice that I sent them. They didn't respond. The apartment's not worth full amount if I don't have heat. All I can do is, I had to buy a space heater, so the landlord should pay for those space heaters. They should pay for the electricity, those kinds of things. And then the eviction judge, certainly in the past, I don't know if they've changed considerably, but then the response was always, yes, you should pay rent, but there's a diminished value to the apartment because of these lack of repairs. So you have to pay this amount and then you don't get evicted. And that's the only way that there really was viable for tenants to fight for repairs, because you can't sue your landlord. Who can afford to hire an attorney to go sue their landlord to force them to do repairs? It's not really a route that's feasible by any means. So I think a diversion mediation type process would still allow for this, but I think it's important to recognize that the eviction court judges were the only judges that were helping tenants in their poor conditions in their units.
Thanks, Julia. Any thoughts or questions? Okay, well, I will go ahead. I agree with everything that's been said. I think that if you were to just do a right to counsel program, that it would be somewhat reactive, and you might waste a lot of resources that way when you could just prevent people from getting to that point in the first place. I think there's a number of measures from eviction diversion programs to just increasing the cost to file an eviction, which there's some research on the correlation between the cost of an eviction to file an eviction and the number of evictions, which is very interesting out there. But I'm going to go ahead and talk with Jeff, our liaison to the HHSAB, since he's our intermediary to that body. I will send an email to Human Rights Commission, and I think from initial discussions with those groups, we can start contacting other organizations and do some research, contact other organizations. So if anyone here interested in participating in that process of exploring ways to reduce evictions? Gail, Jordan, Julia, Patrick, Rosanita. I should write this down. Okay, and Patrick, okay. Okay, I have Rosanita, Gail, Jordan, Julia, and Patrick. Very good, everybody. Great. Wonderful. All right then. Well, I think we can move on to our next discussion point, 7-F, which is discussion on inspection fines. Yeah, if I remember correctly, last time we had asked Kristen to try to do some fact finding on how frequently inspection fines, how can we access data regarding inspection fines?
I was hoping to have an update for you today. I'm meeting with rental housing staff tomorrow afternoon. I was hoping to squeeze that in before the meeting. Are you wondering specifically, just like annual fees collected about inspections, or did you have anything else specific?
I think it's both the fees for having the inspection and actual fines for violations. And if there's any historical data on that too. And for me, this is coming from it seeming like the building department is a little overwhelmed with the number of inspections they have to carry out in a year. And if there's any way we could look at this data to try to come up with ideas on how that department could have more money for more inspectors.
Thank you.
I'm also wondering on the specific issue of the tenant handbook. They said that they usually give a warning if they figure out that a landlord has not been giving out the booklet. And I'm wondering, do they keep a record on that? Because how would they know if there was a repeat offender if they didn't keep records on it? Because last time I checked, I don't think there had been really any fines issued for that.
I can ask that too.
Okay. I actually also have other questions regarding short-term rentals. And I guess just a broad question is is there anywhere that we can find their short-term rental enforcement policy? Because I think I've been really curious to know how they go about that process. If they identify, first of all, how do they identify illegal short-term rentals? And what's the process they go through once they do? Sorry to load you up with lots of questions.
I know that there is a webpage about short-term rentals. I will take a look at that tomorrow before I talk with Leisha. But I will add that to the list.
Okay, thank you.
If they're actually gathering fines on short-term rentals that aren't legally registered, it seems like that could be a big way to make money in a way that tenants and homeowners would be happy to help, because a lot of those buildings are a pain in the neck if you're the neighbor.
Anything else on the issue of inspection fines related to rental housing services? Okay. Great. Well, then we can move on to 7-G, a plan for our November 16th meeting. So we are set to review our bylaws, review and draft a work plan for 2023, and review our meeting date at our next meeting. That's just automatic, right, Kristen?
Yeah, those are good November housekeeping items. Definitely take a look at the CTN schedule that's attached there. It shows where the conflicts are for recording and broadcasting evening meetings. If the group is interested in changing from this third Thursday at 7:30 time, There's not a ton of other options, but
I think it'd be good to start a discussion on short-term rentals. We might get to the meeting and realize we don't have time for that, at which point we could just take it off the agenda, but I think it's good to start that conversation. Any other points of discussion for our next meeting? Julie?
I was feeling a little unsure of myself when I was writing the motion about electricity, because I just read like the report on junk fees. So part of that was leading to me wondering exactly like what the city council was expecting from us as a commission. Should we just randomly be throwing out stuff like electric outages are hard on tenants, or would they rather see a booklet of here's 25 tenant laws that would really improve things in Ann Arbor? Like it, I think a better feeling for what the expectation is would make it easier for me to work on the work plan.
I apologize. Go ahead, Travis.
I can try to answer that for you. I would say there's generally a range of things that we will get from the commissions. I think for something like a statement being made about the impacts of the outages coming to us in a resolution as a statement from the body, kind of adding to an already existing conversation that's taking place, I think is more than enough to just kind of weigh in from this body as well. I know that on junk fees in particular, that's something that we're ultimately going to, work to develop into an ordinance. It's probably not something that other bodies are going to be weighing in on to the extent that you guys are. So I think it really does vary issue to issue. I would say like we do not need a report for every single thing. That's kind of above and beyond, right? So part of our role, Cynthia and I, our role is to take some of these recommendations back to council, and then council ultimately decides if we want to move forward with taking some sort of action on them or not. That's those are sometimes we do get recommendations from commissions that we don't take action on because the council feels differently about it. But you don't have to go through a report is absolutely not necessary because that council is going to do that work also, right? Like you're ultimately making a recommendation that can generally come in a resolution, and then we're going to work with staff on next steps anyway. To the extent that there's on some of these rental ordinances that we're working on, obviously we are looking to have renters informing these discussions, which is why this body is so important. And so that's where we have seen kind of this body go a little bit of a step further in making some of those actual policy recommendations that they'd like to see implemented, because we do acknowledge that we don't have that voice on council right now. I don't know if that fully answers your question because it was really an either or. But I would say I don't think don't ever feel like you have to put together a full like white paper in order to come back. Yeah, a resolution making a statement to council is generally the standard. Yeah.
Thank you, Travis. Okay. I think that answered your question, Julia. Great. I think we're good to move on to item 8, reports. We can go to 8-A, report from City Council. Would either of our council members like to give us a report?
It sounds like, and I apologize that I was late. Sorry, I just went without raising my hand. I was late. It sounds like Councilmember Harrison has already given a bit of an update on the junk fees ordinance that we're working on. So I will skip over that. The other thing that I participated in, and I know Councilmember Harrison was going to join us this morning, but couldn't make it, and said that it would be helpful for me to give an update on, is that we had a tour this morning of some of the can locations in the community. And so we were able to go to the Bryant Center, Green Baxter Court, Brick, and High Cone to view the community centers and kind of see some of those supportive services that are available for some of the communities are subsidized housing. Bryant neighborhood is a community center for a neighborhood that has traditionally been more affordable, although I will acknowledge is starting to see that upward trajectory as we're seeing this affordability crisis. There's a we heard today on the tour that in 2008, and granted there was the bubble had burst at that point. In 2008, the houses in the Bryant neighborhood were going for about $46,000. One of those same houses is currently listed at about $260,000. So the prices are astronomical. But we have the Bryan Community Center, particularly. This is obvious. It's my neighborhood. It's the one I'm most familiar with. So they're serving the residents there. About half of the residents are homeowners, about half are renters. And so it is still a heavily rental community. And in that neighborhood in particular, that's where Bryant and OSI have a really strong partnership right now and are working on sustainability issues, helping to cut some of those electric costs, helping to, in one case, literally save lives, because as they were doing one of their inspections of the house and going through to find out what upgrades could be made, they found out that gas was leaking from the stove into the house and was actually creating health issues for the tenant, or for the tenants there. And so that's some of the work that's happening there. I will acknowledge that one of the biggest things that we heard on the tour was there are simply resource challenges for these really important services in the community. CAN used to be a beneficiary of COFU funding, the coordinated funding, COFU. When COFU fell apart, that was replaced by the city and the county creating the new Human Services Partnership funding. That CAN just found out that they did not receive funding in their grant application this year. And so they're going to have to find some additional sources through other grants or funding available. But one of their biggest needs is actually their food pantries are seeing increased need. And the reality is that Food Gatherers, which is their partner, does not have the resources available to provide them. So there is definitely a food shortage that is impacting residents throughout the community, those in need. And so it is absolutely something, again, where that partnership with that HHSAB liaison might be valuable to have some of those discussions as well, because a lot of the families that are being served by these centers that are currently struggling a little bit are renters as well. And so, yeah.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Comments? Rosanita?
With the in the past, CAN had some, like, a couple of AmeriCorps members connected with them, correct? Do you know if they're going to be getting an increased number of AmeriCorps members who can perhaps help with development, aka searching out grants and helping them to, write those grant applications?
Yeah. I don't know if they're going to get more AmeriCorps members. I know that I think we met one today. I know that there's still a partnership with the program. But I do know we did hear today that they do have a staff person they have a grant writer on staff now. And so that is a person's job, because they've had to ultimately find and replace those funds. And so it sounds like they've had some success, obviously, on the sustainability front. They just announced a pretty substantial grant that's doing help here in the Bryant neighborhood. But obviously some of that, food delivery, those types of things, that's still an area of need.
Thank you. Cynthia?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that we on Monday we passed a resolution to ask our city administrator to complete a feasibility study using building inspectors to complete the home energy score assessments as a voluntary service during the renovation process. So during the ordinance, we passed ordinance a couple of meetings ago to bring the home energy inspections into the real estate process. And, in a year in the city of Ann Arbor, there may be about at most roughly about 1,500 real estate transactions, and roughly a third of those are actually condominiums. So by putting this in the building and inspection process, like basically anytime someone goes to pull a permit for a reno, or they're an addition, or something they're doing on their home, this provides an opportunity to get the score. And we do roughly about, upwards of anywhere 10,000 to 14,000 of these in a year. So this was, in my opinion, a better way to do it, but we passed the ordinance. So we are asking our city administrator to do a feasibility study, a 6-month study, and come back to council to let us know what, and that would increase inspectors, or, well, I won't speak too much on it, but anyway, I just wanted to share with you. And both Travis and I were on that we were sponsors on that resolution. So that's a good thing.
I appreciate that shout out, but credit goes to Cynthia on that. Speaking of white papers, I think, what was the research document we put together? 86 pages. So Cynthia did her homework and put together a really good proposal to move that forward.
So now I'm gonna give some credit then also. So since we're giving credit, gonna give some credit to Rosanita, because she called herself a nerd. So but she much credit to Rosanita for helping with that research. So yes, thank you, Travis, thank you, Rosanita.
Very nice. Well, thank you for your work on these issues. I know we don't have a report from HHSAB liaison. Jeff's not here. Said he's going to email us his report. And I think, I guess, yeah, go ahead, Kristen.
I have kind of a brief report I can give if we're ready to move this report. I'll share my screen. I'll send this out also. You had asked about the rights and duties of tenant booklet to get some information on how those are getting handed out, and I have one of the admin assistants in our office put together a spreadsheet that I was really, really pleased with, so I attached it. I'll show it next. But the clerk's office is working to update the city written section of the booklet. The white section, we're looking to include updates on the resource pages to kind of reflect the same as what's on the Renters Commission webpage. And then we're also trying to, if there's enough space and it works out, to include like an infographic kind of like this, or this one for ELO, to reflect some of the new changes in code. What else? Oh, we're also handing these out when we hand out the booklets, these kind of printouts of like at a glance, right to renew an ELO. Rental housing gave that information on the agent tenant issue. The clerk's office also sent rental housing all of the text and graphics on the rental housing laws in Ann Arbor page, because we got a couple of questions to our office about where they're kind of like, hey, what's right to renew? I've never heard of it. Do you have information on that? So we gave that information to rental housing, and then we also gave them just the text that's on the Renters Commission page. So they don't have to duplicate work. The rent control motion that you all passed last time was included on the 10/16 City Council meeting agenda. What else? Oh, I was surprised to see that email subscriptions are up to 538. So it's up about 200 since I checked last. So that's pretty interesting. And I send out emails before every regular meeting. If you'd like me to send out more, like for committee meetings, I'm happy to. Also, this is kind of news for Renters Commission. You have a visible tab now on the clerk's boards and commissions page. So it's no longer a web page that you can only find by typing in a2gov.org/Renters Commission. That's exciting. Also, the clerk's office posted on their Instagram that there's a vacancy for the attorney with experience representing landlord's position. We didn't receive any applications, unfortunately, but many people saw it. So if anybody has any ideas or contacts for how to reach somebody who fits that criteria, let me know and we can work on it. Oh, and then this is
Thank you so much, Kristen. Yeah. Thank you. That's great.
Yeah. Lately it's been busy because it's kind of what was like move-in time. Yeah. Let me know if you have any questions.
Okay. Jordan?
That is super awesome. I have a little muffin that is expiring very quickly, so I have to go, but I wanted to make one announcement. I was at the Capitol on Tuesday for Senate Bill HB 4878, which is fair chance access to housing. Right now it's kind of stuck and we really need Representative Coleman to get it out of the House. So if anybody or any listeners have it in them to send Representative Coleman an email and tell him that you support fair chance access to housing, that would be great. Essentially, this bill would make it so that landlords could not look at criminal backgrounds to prevent them from housing. There are some carve outs. For example, if the conviction was a year ago, arson and human trafficking, as well as somebody on the lifetime sex offender list, those could still all be something to preclude you. But essentially, this is trying to get it just so that these folks are looked at for the type of tenant they will be, the type of neighbor they will be. We know statistically that most people do not reoffend a second time, and the portion of our population here in Michigan that this affects is huge. It's almost 1/3 of Michiganders have a conviction. So we really do need to look at some of these things. We also know that this essentially gives landlords a way to racially discriminate if we're going to acknowledge that the criminal justice system is unfair and biased and disproportionately impacts Black and Brown citizens. And then we know that if we are using criminal records to allow them to not have housing, that just kind of feeds into that discrimination. So if you do support it, please, you can follow one group that has been doing a lot of advocacy is Nation Outside. So you can follow them on Facebook to get some email writing tips. They've been really vocal and helpful in getting the bill written and getting things going. And if you have any questions, also you can email the Renters Commission and Kristen can get those to me and I can try to help too. So that was my last announcement. Thank you guys all for being here and sorry to duck out early, but it's not going to be pretty here in a few more minutes. So thank you all.
Thank you for that, Jordan.
Thank you, Jordan.
I'm sorry, I didn't raise my hand. Thank you, Jordan, for your advocacy.
Absolutely. No worries at all. Okay. Yeah. So are there, Kristen, I think I would love to discuss I am so happy to hear about all those developments. I think we should maybe discuss those at our next meeting if possible, because I have lots of questions and very grateful for work and the work of the other staff members on this. But let's keep going with reports from commissioners. Are there any other reports? Okay, going once and twice. All right, we can go on to item 9, second general public comment.
All right. Public comment can be made by phone by calling 877-853-5247 or 888-788-0099 and entering meeting ID 935-8080-14 or 1941, or by Zoom, by joining the Zoom link at a2gov.org/renters commission meeting. And if you are in the Zoom meeting, you can press *9 to raise your, or you can press the raise hand feature to raise your hand. If you're calling, you can press *9 to raise your hand. And you can address the Renters Commission about any topic for up to 3 minutes. So if there is anyone who would like to address the Renters Commission, go ahead and raise your hand now and we'll call on you. All right.
Oh, we do have
ahead.
someone.
Perfect. Go ahead.
I'm wondering if the Tenant Education Committee has any plans on educating future potential renters to stop shopping so early. I think demand is driving a lot of this.
The chair of the education committee isn't here, so I'm going to jump in for her. We have been talking about having some public type sessions where we give education about the law. We did talk earlier in this meeting about considering some changes or whether it would take a legal suit to get some more protections to make it a little bit easier to enforce the early leasing ordinance. So I don't have any date to give you right now, but it is on kind of our agenda.
Thank you. All right, and there are no other attendees.
Thank you, Kristen. Okay, we can move on to item 10, which is communication. We have 3 emails, all related to Courthouse Square. I have read through these. I don't think there's anything for us that is actionable personally, but I'm willing to, if anyone has any points or questions or disagrees with that point of view, I'll open the floor.
I'm sorry,
Thank you.
I didn't read them. Is anybody still complaining that the elevator isn't working?
There are different complaints regarding, I think, like HUD rules and rent increases. I think it's just sort of impossible it's not our place to really get super involved in this, besides just trying to connect them to resources, which I think has been attempted. And I don't think we can really get a full picture of what's happening. I did try to reach out to the attorney who's at Legal Services of South Central Michigan, who has been working at the Courthouse Square apartment complex, and I haven't received a response, but I did get another name for someone to reach out to. So I haven't yet done that. I got this at Green Fair, and I will do that tomorrow morning, just to check in and make sure that they're connected with this, the lawyer is connected with the resources that they need. Okay. Last chance for any questions or comments on this. Okay, we can move to item 11, which is adjournment. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll motion.
I'll
Thank you,
second.
Patrick. It was seconded by Rosanita. Thank you. All those in favor of adjourning, say yay.
Yay.
Yeah.
Yay. All those opposed, say nay. That we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a great night.
So take
Thank
care.
you. Good night.
Bye.